Where did I grow up? It was on northeast Minneapolis, 4 blocks from Big Jack's. Is that what you want to know?
Did you like Big Jack's or something?
Well, it was a fancy place for weddings and stuff there. There was 8 of us kids in the family, 6 brothers and a sister.
And how many of you are left?
3. My oldest brother is still living. He's 104. And my sister is 93 and I'm 96.
What's your secret to living to an old age?
To get old, I don't know. I guess it's because I eat all kinds of different food. And I think when we grew up, we didn't have a lot of this prepared food. And it was all homegrown, a lot of it. We had gardens, and fresh food was the best. If the people had a place in the yard, you know, they grew stuff that they could use, vegetables like green beans.
Were you able to get any meat?
My parents used to buy meat from my aunt when she butchered pigs, and sometimes we had meat from like a butcher shop after a while, but we didn't go hungry for anything as a rule, because we were glad to get what we could, and we appreciated everything we had. You couldn't just go in a store and buy stuff and throw it away after, like we do now. Everything, like even a milk bottle, we had milkman come around, and he brought the milk in a glass bottle, and you emptied the bottle and put it out there the next day. He picked up the bottles, took them to the creamery, and they washed them there again. And then you got another fresh bottle of milk. So that's the way everything was. There was no cartons and stuff like we have now, and throwing everything away. We have a lot of waste in the country. The first job, well, actually, we had paper routes when we were kids. But after I started working, I worked in a casket company during World War II. And I was making batting, kind of mattresses for the caskets.
Oh.
I hurt my fingers in the casket company because I had a machine that I was working by that was tearing batting across, like, you know, wool batting. And they used to spread it and soften it. And I happened to touch it a little bit, and it had little nails on it. And that's what I did. I broke the 2 fingers.
Oh.
I can't really remember what they paid me at the time. I was just out of school at that time, out of high school. Or I went to vocational school.
Okay. What year did you graduate from that? From high school?
1946.
So
No, wait a minute. 1941.
1941?
1941. 1946 is when I got married.
Oh.
I can't remember the dates
That
now.
might be right.
We will interrupt all programs to give you latest news bulletins.
From the NBC newsroom in New York, President Roosevelt said in a statement today that the Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, from the air.
I was at my neighbor's house. We lived kind of just at the end of the alley. We had friends on both sides. But my girlfriend was at the end of the block there, and I was over to her house. And we were listening to the radio at the time, and that was when we found out the news, and her father was home at the time, and he let us know what was going on, because we were kind of young at that time. We all got kind of scared because we heard of the bombs going off, you know, on the news and everything. And then I ran home after and talked to my folks, and they were listening also and heard about it. So everybody was aware of it, that what happened. And at the time of the bombs going off, my brother was in the Navy, and he was on a battleship on the USS New Mexico. And he was stationed, I think, in Maine or someplace, he said at the time. I don't quite remember. And he was kind of young at the time, too, but he was in the Navy for 6.5 years. And he was home after the battle was over.
Okay, so Grandpa was in the Air Force, right?
Yeah, he was I think in Italy at part of the time. He was repairing airplanes as they came in with flak holes, they call them, I guess, or something, where they got hit by some of the bombs. And so his job was to patch these holes up. They called them the tin tapper.
The tin tapper?
Yeah, because he had to pack these pieces of metal over the hole and rivet them on somehow.
Are cheering and screaming, making noise with sound makers, throwing confetti and bits of paper, streamers, and all sorts of things that they can find to celebrate this greatest of all victories, the surrender of the Japanese. Believe me, ladies and gentlemen.
I was on the way going to work. I was on the streetcar at the time, and I was going down Hennepin Avenue in Minneapolis because I worked downtown in the north area. And people were running in the streets and cars were going crazy. People were getting out of the cars and all the way down Hennepin Avenue. Oh, everybody was so excited because they heard about the end of the war. And I was almost at work at the time, and I went up there, but there was nobody there, so I went down Hennepin Avenue and met some of the people. And everybody was just cheering and having a good time. They were all so excited. Oh, my parents, well, I guess they were chased out of Poland during the war that they had out there, and they ended up in Austria, I think. I don't know the whole story. And they came into New York area there by Ellis Island. And that's where all the people were coming in, and they had to go through a building where they had a doctor. You had to go change your clothes, you had to get a shower, you had to be checked to see if you were sick. You stayed there in an area that they tended to people that were sick, and they wouldn't let you out until you were well. My mother's parents passed away before they came to America.
Yeah.
They grew up, they were teens in their years when they came here, both my father and my mother. And they were sort of neighbors out there. They knew each other, kind of. So when they all came to New York, then they settled in by the Bronx areas, kind of, for a while. And that's where they had to get jobs so they could earn some money. And I think they had just a room maybe where they stayed that they rented. Then I guess they found out they can come to Minnesota. They said there was free land and everything in Minnesota, so they came to Minnesota. And a lot of people that came on those ships, they all kind of settled in little groups. They came from different countries even.
Well, so each country was in a little cluster?
Yeah, they kind of clustered all over Northeast and even out different parts of Minnesota. But that's where, like where I grew up, we had different nationalities, and each nationality had their own little group of people. They built their churches, they built their schools, and they had their teachers that taught their kids. They had stores after, they started bakeries, and they all had their stuff that they were so good in. And so people got along real good. They helped each other, and they had a lot of fun together a lot of times, because then they had festivals and everything. People went to church on Sunday, and after church it was family day. Everybody got together and had a good time. So it was a good thing for a mixture of different nationalities, because you learned a lot from each one.
Who taught you how to crochet?
I used to watch my mother. She learned kind of by watching people in the park, because the women used to go with their kids while they played in the park, and they used to take the crocheting with them. She used to watch them, and she learned how to do it.
So I have a book at home with stuff that you wrote when I was little, I guess. And it said in there that you and Grandpa were wedding crashers. You guys would go to random people's weddings so you could dance.
Oh, that who was crashing with
You
me?
and Grandpa would go to random people's weddings just so you could dance.
I don't think Grandpa crashed. It was me and my girlfriend usually that would do that, or one of my cousins and I used to do that. They were weddings that we kind of knew the people, but we went there and we wanted to dance because we liked the music. And when they went to have their dinners, that's when we went in, because the music was still playing, so we started to dance and have a good time. I think the addition of like running water, and when you had a real nice bathroom and stuff, because years ago you were without a lot of those things. My mother got a refrigerator at home, and she used to have an ice box in the basement, and they used to go, in fact, I used to go down to the ice house. We had one several blocks away from us, and you'd go over there and get a 25-pound or whatever it was, I forget, on a wagon piece of ice, and you had to hurry home to get it so before it would melt. And then later on they had an ice truck that used to come around, and you could order a piece of ice. But that ice melted quick, and you couldn't keep nothing long in it. So then when those refrigerators came out, we got my mother one, and that kept everything nice and cold, and you couldn't throw everything away then, because it was good food, you know. It lasted. So that was a big invention, I think. And then radios, we had radios all the time at first, and we used to listen to all these stories that used to come on. There was good stories. And then when the TVs came out, of course, then that was a big thing. And you could see all the programs happening right then. We had a telephone in the house where I could call the girlfriends that I went to school with. And all those things started to come up after. So all these inventions really helped a lot of people at work too, you know, because you could call work, and if you were sick or something, you could call them and say, I can't come in today.
Well, how did you meet Bob?
He was on the computer, and it was kind of a club that I think it was over 65. So anybody that was, you know, in the older ages, they could get together on the computer. And I met him by just writing a email to him, and we got to talking and stuff about our ages and what we did and all that. And he sounded like he grew up in my old neighborhood. They played all the same games we did. Kick the stick on the corners, what we called, you take a stick and set it up on the curb kind of sideways, and you kick it and see how far you can kick it, and then you run around the four corners to get into home. And just all kinds of goofy things that we had to invent ourselves. Yeah, well, I just decided I wanted to meet him because he sounded like he needed somebody to talk to. He was older than I was.
Well, this is after Grandpa had already passed, so it's not like
Yeah,
anything
Grandpa
fishy.
was gone already. And so I just thought it would be kind of interesting to see what it was like, because when I studied in school in the 8th grade, I was sitting at my desk and we were studying geography and all the different states. We came across New Jersey, and I thought I would never see New Jersey when I was in the 8th grade. And this was my chance. So I went out there, Kathy and I went out there to meet his daughter, and we met him then that day. And it was fun because we got to learn a lot about New Jersey, seeing it, not only in the books, but we went out there to see a lot of the East Coast. And that was real interesting, because that was more fun to see all these places in person rather than just reading about it in a book.